Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you enjoy your lunch and welcome to another edition of Neo Show. This time live fireside chat with Jeff Wang. Welcome to Gen Digital.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Um, Jeff has a pretty interesting background. He was with Windsurf. Windsurf is one of the leaders in the AI coding space. And there was some drama happened about 10 months ago. And in the last 5 years or so, or maybe four years, the AI space has drama almost every day. But some of the drama was bigger than others. I would have probably considered the Sam Altman thing with OpenAI was one of the biggest, or probably the biggest drama. I would have considered this one easily the top 10 on my list. I would love to hear from your side. But more importantly, we are going to talk about the AI coding, the technology, the evolution, the landscape, right? Anthropic just went to what, $44 billion ARR in no time, never happened in human history, and I would love to get your take. And the last but not least, we wanted to talk more about the transformation, right? Every company is going through some transformation. You spend a lot of time talking to customers. So that's what today's fireside is about. With that, why don't you give a quick intro of yourself first?
Yeah, so I was with Windsurf 3 years now. I joined as a head of business, kind of had every role at the company at one point. And then, of course, at Cognition, I'm going to transition to the president of a new enterprise. So I spend a lot of my time traveling the world, opening up new regions, learning what new product lines we need, and working with other governments as well. So it's a rare opportunity for me to be in town for this week. So it's good to stop by here.
And maybe just to start with the story, like you were with Windsurf, right? Windsurf was about, everyone heard that they were about to be bought by OpenAI for $3 billion. And what happened that Friday, and then what happened throughout the weekend? Just to tell us the story, whatever you can share with us. I'm pretty sure some of the things, you are not ready to share with the public yet, but just to give people what you experienced to the best you can.
So actually, the crazy part of the story is how many players were involved. Obviously, like OpenAI was involved, but shortly after, Anthropic actually shut us off. So that was another crisis we had to go through.
So just to give people the background, the OpenAI was about to buy you for $3 billion. The deal or the proposal was expiring on Friday.
No, that's actually made up. That's not real.
Oh, that's made up. But right before the Friday, Anthropic shut off your access.
The news came out about I think April of the year. So there was like a couple months of so we had to deal with this Anthropic situation. Cursor versus Windsurf was like we were actually pulling ahead of them, and then after Anthropic models were no longer available, Cursor kind of flew over and kind of gained like the mind share at that point. And then there was in the news, like again I can say what's reported, like Satya and Sam, Microsoft and OpenAI were talking about the IP rights over Windsurf as well, and that was also starting to delay a lot of the time that things were taking. And then finally, Google steps in and does this very, very quick deal to take the founders and the engineers, leaving a few engineers behind to support the product. And then I only found out like 3 days before it was announced. And they said, Jeff, you're the CEO now, and we're not allowed to give you advice. We're not allowed to make any decisions. So after Friday, you will never see us again. And then that's what happened. And Friday they announced the whole thing to the company. They were on a Zoom call for a minute, and then I had to then just like kind of handle the situation with all the 250 to 300 people in the room, and then figure out what to do with the company at that moment. And then what ended up happening was we got acquired by Cognition. And for those of you that don't know Cognition, it created Devin, which is like the cloud agent that does a bunch of things. We can talk about that. And then Monday we announced the acquisition, which was again a very crazy saga of Silicon Valley. I think it was like easily the most crazy story last year, at least.
And you said very few people involved. I remember, Jeff and I met at a Human X, one of the largest AI conferences a few months ago. both of us were giving a talk over there, and then in the that evening we sort of met, and you said the first person who found out there's such a deal was your accountant. She just basically asked you, there are $2.4 billion showed up in the account suddenly.
The number is not reported, but
Whatever the number.
number is, yeah.
some number just showed up. Imagine for a second that, well, 2.4 is a number I saw online. That's safe for me to say that. But some numbers just showed up in the account magically. That's probably never happened in any other corporate development history. Okay, so let's actually more talk about what we have gone through, because this was 10 months ago. The industry has gone through a lot in the last 10 months, right? AI coding, the maturity of the model, and then how we are doing things. I think 10 months ago, I would say if an engineer tell me that, hey, I probably I don't write code anymore. I just rely on the coding agent to write code. That engineer is probably at the forefront of the at the time, right? But 10 months later, I would say a lot of you, many of you would say the same thing. So things changed a lot. So obviously we all know OpenAI, Codex, and the Anthropic, Cloud Code. How do you see cognition being positioned like in this world, right? Are you doing something very similar? Are you competing with them directly? Can you give our audience the explanation?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that Devin did was, and this is like 2 years ago, was, hey, we need to run agents in the cloud, and we need to give these agents a certain set of tools and abilities. And right now we're at the point where, today we just launched a Windows VM. So if you hand off work to an agent, it could launch its own Windows VM. It can deploy the app. It can test the app. It can actually run all the testing that you've given it. And then when it hands the task back to you, you can be very confident that the task is done. So what we do it with Devin is spin up environments, do these very, very end-to-end tasks, and then give it back to the human. And what happens is the human is giving these tasks, and there's like, do they just sit there, right? Like a couple hours could pass before the task is done. So what do you do as a human? You probably give it another task, and then you keep giving it more and more tasks. And what's happening right now is you see people with dozens of agents running at the same time. And what you just described as like, I'm interacting with a coding agent, and I give it, I'm writing code, it's writing it for me, is now in the past. So we're seeing another order of magnitude of work getting done because you're able to hand off so much work in parallel to these agents now. And that is kind of the new paradigm shift that I think how we're positioned is very different than any of the other coding agents. And we use all the models too. So if there's a better model for a task, we use that. I'm getting a lot of CFOs tapping on my shoulder. Hey, I just blew up, I budgeted $1 million. I just spent $10 million last month. Right? And that means like that's 120 million so far. They're probably going to spend like 300 million or more, right? So now there's this whole paradigm shift again of how do we run these agents efficiently? How do we give the agents the minimum viable model for the task? And that is something we're also very focused on right now too. So yeah.
I still would like to double click on this, right? You said it's very different from whether maybe Anthropic or the OpenAI, but Anthropic Cloud Code plus all the harnessing framework, all the tools, isn't that the same thing? Like, you can basically give the task to Cloud Code, and then with some sort of framework associated with it potentially. Like, isn't that the same thing? Or how do you see the difference?
Yeah. If you want to spin up 1,000 VMs right now to run a bunch of agents, I'd invite you to go to your laptop and try.
I kind of qualify, Cloud Code plus some framework associated with it. Right?
Like what? Like Devin?
I mean, there are a lot of open source framework out there. People are attempting to do that.
Where is that running on? What infra is that running on? Is that your infra, or is it infinitely scalable?
You are saying that I still have to do a lot of the busy work.
What about the admin privileges? What access to your framework and your VMs have access to? What about traceability? If I go to a bank, if I go to Goldman Sachs, and I say, here, I'm going to just give you all these VMs, you can spin up your Cloud Code, and give it to your organization. Okay, like what access does everybody have?
So basically, right? You are saying that the alternative is me using Cloud Code, harnessing framework, compliance, a bunch of the scaffolding things around it. Mm-hmm. I can achieve it, but you already have a turnkey solution for that. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. So this is like where a lot of people feel that they want to build this. It's like, hey, I have these agents now. I can put it in a computer and I'll run it. But it's like, okay, wait, I have to give access to this
By the way, I
computer.
know a lot of people building this as we speak.
Yes, yes.
So, but basically, you're saying that I already have the turnkey solution. I already think about the cost, the compliance, all those things for you.
Oh,
So
does anybody have Windows VMs? I'm curious.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, the answer is no. What about Android?
Why Windows VM is that important?
It's actually a licensing thing. It's a very complicated thing to do, and also with Android emulation as well. There's like a lot of complications.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think my point is that we're always like very, very focused on like the infra layer and advancements of what our customers actually need, and then we go deliver to them. And a lot of other people are building from scratch. And when we built Codium before Windsurf, we had the exact same thing happen. It's like, yeah, we can build a coding agent ourselves. We're going to use this open source model. We'll provide the infra. Then they run into throughput issues and they say, oh, don't worry, it's an infra problem. We'll figure out the throughput. Okay, now let's scale it to 10,000 engineers. Okay, that's actually a very hard problem, Jeff. Let me figure it out, right? So I think the main argument here is that if you're really focused on the problem, you have a lot of different customers with very specific problems for us to solve. Then we're able to go and solve it and then keep building on top of it. Then everybody has access to it. If you're building it for your own organization, it's very hard to scale it. And then as more requirements come in, it's very hard to build on top of that and maintain that as well. So I think that's like the reason why I push back so aggressively here.
No, I think that's fair. Agent, coding agent that became a thing only about a year ago, right? Harnessing became a thing about 3 months ago. So, but you guys started, Cognition started what, 3 years ago or?
Just 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 years ago, and then, but you have been doing this coding agent. I mean, the kind of
cloud coding agent for Cognition side.
Got it. And do you still maintain the original Windsurf sort of the thing that's not quite the cloud agent stuff, or you maintain two different product line, or how does it work?
Yeah, we're actually rebranding everything to Devin. So the reason why is I introduce myself. I say, hey, I'm from Cognition. No, how about Windsurf? How about Devin? So it's kind of like more of a marketing thing. Like we have to refocus our branding around one brand. The second thing is Windsurf is still there as a desktop app, but the usage of the app is as an IDE is dwindling. Like people are no longer really using the IDE. So what we're trying to transform the local app to is an agent manager. So when you have agents running, you have a dozen agents, what does that look like? How do you organize them? How do you unblock them? And how do you actually connect them to other types of agents as well? So I think this is like the new form factor we think is going to be very popular for the local app.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions that's probably many of you would ask, right? The AI coding agent is great, but sometimes the quality is not very good, right? It would write millions of line code, in a few minutes, in a few hours, but sometimes when I look at it, or people say the quality is not there. How do you think about this? Like, are we going to live in the world that vast majority of the code is going to be written by coding agent, yet the quality is subpar compared to, the standard that we kind of got used to in the last decade? How do you think about it?
I mean, if you are giving very, very detailed requirements of like the outcomes you're trying to achieve, you're giving good ways to test that the application is running as expected. This is, by the way, what a good deployed engineering team is good for. It gives you like playbooks and unit tests and ways that when you do a migration, for example, you know exactly what to expect. So when you are deploying these tasks to agents, it is giving you lots of proof that it did the right thing. And especially with like a cloud agent like Devin, it just keeps trying over and over until it gets the right outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Now, if you're giving a very vague task, like, hey, I'm gonna have this fireside chat with Howie today, and I want you to just create me an app so I can put in the background. It has no idea what you're asking for, really, right? Maybe it creates like a graphic that moves, but that again is like something that we didn't specify the outcome enough. And I think what the deployed engineering team and what we do with our customers is really train you how to get the right outcomes. And I would push back on the fact that there's like AI slop, that if you are very, very specific with the outcomes, that it's actually better than what a human can write. And of course, like when you're modifying existing large enterprise code bases, you're more like going to a specific outcome for a specific feature, let's say. And it's a little bit different than saying like build an app from scratch. I have no idea how the pieces are connected, and something could break because I just changed something because nobody knows what's going on. I don't see that world happening, actually.
So the problem is humans, not AI, basically. If there is an AI slop, it's the human who's responsible for it.
It should be. If I used ChatGPT to write an email and I hit send without reading it, it's probably my fault. It's probably not ChatGPT's fault, right?
So, by the way, you don't need to worry about pushing back. I'm your advocate, but I wanted to play devil's advocate.
I think, for
I wanted to play that devil's advocate, nevertheless. What about kernel level code? What about performance, kind of a sensitive requirements? Do you think agents today are ready to do those kind of coding well?
Not well. The amount of kernel level code available is not very much. But if there's ways to verify the kernel level code is being written correctly, you could potentially fine tune a model to be better and better at it too. So if that is something like we have again, let me think of how much I could say. If we have customers that really need this code, let's say, that is something we could focus on improving the models for.
And then performance sensitive applications, you would say the same thing. Like, I'm kind of worried about the, CPU cycles. That sort of applications, you feel like agents are not quite ready for prime time, or how do you think about it?
It's a good question. As the agents are better at like algorithmic principles and more understanding of the code base, you could have agents running, crawling through your code base at all times, looking up for improvements. We actually do have a product that is crawling for security vulnerabilities. So like looking for ways that this application has dependencies, can you cut them off? Are there any loopholes or ways that an attacker can hit it? That is something we're actively adding to the pipeline for Devon. So as you're like creating these apps, you're a little bit more safer than before. As you know, if you have a 0.001% chance of something going wrong, you multiply that by 100x code, you move that decimal place, right? So you need to have more tools to address all these cybersecurity things that are happening today.
So early on, you said, the Devon or the Cognition has a lot of the framework or compliance or security, Windows VM, everything, right? But you also realize that the rest of the world, even though they may not have it today, but they are going to have that before the end of the year. So at that point, what's your differentiation?
Yeah, I mean, we always have to keep ahead, right? It's like the Chinese open source models are 6 months behind always. The model companies have to be 6 months ahead to really stay relevant, right?
The harnessing level, basically.
So basically, you need to be way more productive at what you do than anybody else on the market. And you have to, and then the second thing is actually the outcomes you're driving with your customers have to be very, very like provable. And this is again why everybody is copying the deployed engineering thing as well, right? Google just announced it like last week, and we've been doing this for like 3 years now. So there's like, and Palantir's been doing it for even longer. So the deployed engineering part is like a very, very big differentiator from us. Like when we go to our customers, we actually try to understand what is your most high value projects you're working on, and then we go and just do it with you. And then that motion teaches you how to use the tools correctly and how to scale that to the organization. That is very hard to do. Like you actually need to hire very, very good engineers to have that kind of role. But everybody around is starting to figure that out. Like they're like OpenAI, Anthropic are like acquiring companies for deployed engineers now, right? And if people are asking me, what should my son study in college? My immediate response now is like, well, whatever it takes to become a deployed engineer. They're getting paid so much right now, and they're very, very high value, very scarce resources right now.
People need to deal with clients directly, like human touch. Is that what you're kind of implying as well?
So you need the human touch. You need to be able to talk to people, and you need to be very technical. And believe it or not, it is very hard to find this combination. But this can be trained in theory. Like, but I know like Gen Z now is like even less social than before. So this is something that I hope that we can also address in society as well.
I was about to get to it, like what should the people learn, but you already gave the answer. That's interesting. But stay on the technical side a little bit more. Do you build your own model?
Yeah, so we have actually several models we build. And the reason why is we want to make it way cheaper to run a lot of the different tasks we're doing. So for example, we just released a bug checking model, and the bug checking model is just trained to find bugs, and it's much smaller, much cheaper. We have a agentic search model. As you guys have probably heard of like embedding search and RAG and all that stuff, that actually becomes increasingly hard as you increase the size of the code base to like gigabytes. And we've seen terabytes size repos now. But if you use agentic search, you can crawl through the code bases at scale and still be able to retrieve the relevant things you need for the prompt and context engineering and eventually compaction and getting all the knowledge into one long trajectory. But we also train other coding models as well. This is, again, all to bring down the costs, but also we can create specific experiences that are different too. For example, we do run these coding models on Cerebras hardware, and that outputs at like 2,000 tokens per second. I think if you look at like Gemini Flash announcement yesterday, they were bragging about like 200 30 tokens per second. So we're running like 10x faster than that. So what can you do with that? You can do like different types of features like code maps where you map out the code base and feature. You can do things like deep wiki, which explains the code right after you type it. You can hover over it, tells you what's going on. So all these like different models that we train, fine tune, all these things are meant to give you unique product experiences to help the developer.
So do you still use Anthropic OpenAI APIs a lot?
Yeah. So if it's a very hard task, I think like you can, obviously everyone knows like Opus and even GPT-5.5 now can probably do it. And then if you do that to every task though, you'll probably notice your bill is like spiking up, right? So what we're trying to do is figure out that balance of like actually if you look at all the tests we do at Devin, probably we can reduce the price by half. Is like one measure. And we have a new agent coming out called Devin Lite, which is half the cost. So I think there is this like training that needs to happen of like, we don't need to use Opus or 5.5 for everything. And like I was doing the math with like some CFOs are like I have 10,000 engineers, they're spending $5,000 a month. You do the math, that's like what, like $600 million, right? It's like, okay, so maybe we shouldn't be calculating that much for spend. So that's one reason. And again, like the other reason is for unique product experiences.
Well, since you talk about the cost, Jensen Huang actually said about a month ago that for engineer who's being paid for $500,000 a year, they should spend $250,000 for the coding agent or tokens. Of course, he has some reasons to say that, but beyond that, what do you think a reasonable ratio or a reasonable spend, like $200 an engineer a year, or how to think about this kind of thing?
Yeah. So internally at Cognition, I believe we're actually close to that. Because they turn on the fast mode too, which is 6 times more expensive. But let's say it's $20,000 an engineer a month. That is like $250,000.
Wow. $20,000 a month
per engineer. And again, you could, if you turn off fast mode.
And then most of that cost is the Anthropic APIs, most.
Yes, where it's now a mixture of that and GPT-5.5. Yeah. But if you divide that by 6, if you remove fast mode, that's a huge savings already, right? But here's the math though. Over the course of 6 months, we've outputted 7x the throughput of PRs, merge PRs. And we've only hired like 10% more engineers. So if we're spending about 50% more on their salary, which is like half a million, 250K, and we're outputting 700%, I think that's a good trade-off. Like that's an acceptable trade-off to us. However, you're at a big company.
Roughly speaking, what, 50 engineers, right? 60 engineers.
Yeah, we're probably around 65, 70 is my guess, yeah.
So you hire something like, 5 or 6 or however many engineers, half a dozen engineers, but your overall engineering throughput, is like you said a
7x.
7x.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting saving, right? Even though your token cost per engineer is very high. Right.
Even the fast mode, right? Like they're willing to pay that 6x multiple, which is very interesting to me. If you look at the big companies, though, when you have tens of thousands of engineers, that number is very high. Yeah. So that's a trade-off they have to make. I will say one thing: the number of engineers we have is about the same as when we had at Windsurf. So if you think about it, we're already managing Windsurf, Devin Review, Deep Wiki, a lot of other products are coming out too, with the same number of engineers. That is crazy to think about. That this means AI is really working right now.
Okay. I'm not going to leave the technical part without talking about security. So you actually, one of the things you discussed at HumanX was security. Can you give us a rundown about how you think about security in this space? Because, a lot of things happened even just 2 days ago, right? The breach at GitHub or a bunch of things. Can you tell us what's in your mind about security?
Yeah, I think there's several things here. One is these models are able to find vulnerabilities faster. You can probably even, like Mythos is coming out, you can prompt these models to say like, oh, I'm a security researcher. I need you to find a vulnerability here. And it'll probably find a vulnerability. And then a hacker can use that to get into Gen or whatever company as well. So this is a very dangerous
Not Gen, but elsewhere.
Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. Like one aspect is there's a danger of some using the models to find bugs. The other is like generating like a supply chain attack or a malicious extension or something in the app store or getting poisoned too. Like you're just vibe coding something. I think one of the earliest I think it was the Axios supply chain tech. I think it was somebody had their open claw open with access to publish get PRs. So and then somebody was able to do a prompt injection to upload that file into that repo. So some of these AI form factors could be a risk too. Of security risks, right? And then, yeah, when you vibe code something and you just submit it, nobody's stamping the approval, that could be a risk too. So what we're trying to think about is, hey, if you are moving all this code through this CI/CD or through the STLC, we should be inserting as much security checks as possible, right? But I already mentioned the bug checking model. You can run that bug checking model anytime for free right now. You just like Azure and Windsurf or Devon Desktop, we're going to call it. You can just hit the bug check button and it'll just quickly sweep everything. That's like one example. The other is when it goes to Devon review, it does a sweeping, like we use models to sweep across the code base to look for any potential vulnerabilities too. That's another check, but you should still have all your other security tools too. Like I said, if you're multiplying the code by 100x, your probability has increased for something bad to happen, right?
So what is the sentiment of the CIO and the CISOs on this topic? Because, about a year ago, my impression is they feel like, yeah, AI coding, vibe coding was already a buzzword, but I don't think they're spending a lot of time and energy and the money on it. What do you see today? Like, do they see, wow, AI coding is such a big, problem? Like, what do you see? Because you talk to customers a lot. What do you see their sentiment shift?
I will say about a year ago, people thought vibe coding was going to be the future. Everybody in here could create their own app and then they deploy it and somebody can use it. And that's like the dream state scenario. Then you just keep going for the story a little bit. And it's like, okay, I want a feature request. Okay, do I report it to that person? Oh, I found a bug. Does everyone, where do I report this bug? Do I message them on Slack? And then eventually you just realize like if everybody here is creating apps, it's all chaos, right? That's what a lot of CIOs and organizations went through last year. And now, some teams or some companies have teams specifically for vibe coded apps that they maintain. And then they have a ticketing system for features and such. We personally limited the number of vibe coding apps to, I think there's 2 or 3 now, because they're like mission critical apps, but they would have cost us a lot of money. And now, if you look at SaaS tools as well, SaaS tools have just become databases. Like if you look at Salesforce, nobody even logs into Salesforce anymore. They just go to Devon and say, hey, can you...
That's my usage pattern was Workday.
Yeah.
So I only use Cursor against the Workday now.
Yeah, and then soon Devon, right? So anyway, when you interact with these SaaS tools now, you're using agents to like write the data, retrieve the data, edit the data, and even things like Figma. Figma becomes like a company brand database, right? Like everybody will just go use the Figma FCP. Hey, generate a new webpage, look on our company branding from Figma. And then they don't actually go into Figma. Like we still do, and I think for the foreseeable future we will, but the models are improving rapidly on the UI front too now. So more and more SaaS tools are just like databases, and the SaaS apocalypse is happening, right? There's a whole like re-rating of the multiples. That is the reason why. Yeah.
Because the valuation is only on the database part and not the user workflow part.
Yeah, database and ecosystem probably. Yeah.
On the vibe coding, I share a story. I actually have a friend, at Facebook. At Facebook, at one point, they have the leaderboard for the engineers, how many tokens you use. So she was very excited. She was like one of the top, users of the leaderboard. And I asked her, I said, what do you do? And then she said, I'm doing this, our team doing a lot of on-call. So I kind of wrote up applications to help the on-call guys, to solve problem, agents, all that kind of thing. You can imagine, right? And then she said, when I realized that, people have feature requests, have bug fix, then I'm on call. So she wound up with, being on call on her vacation. And then she decided to shelf that application for good because, if she doesn't, have other help, she becomes the maintainer of that on-call helper applications. So very much matching your story. But back to just the security for 1 second. Do you see that because of AI coding agent writing so many lines of code, do you see that a lot more security spending as a result of that?
Yeah, it might not even be security software. It might just be more tokens spent on analyzing the code for security issues. But like I said, the hackers can do the same thing. So they will be spending their tokens to find vulnerabilities too. But to your point, like with these large token spends, part of it will go to security, more and more of it. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So much for the technology side. Let's actually talk about just transformation side. I started with Cognition as a company, right? You have been with the company for about 10 months. What do you see today's companies like different in the organization? How is that different from, many companies prior to this AI coding, agentic coding revolution? Like, what's the difference? What do you see?
I think for small companies, like especially Cognition, we've reorged our engineering team every 2 to 3 months. And the reason why is because the roles are changing. You used to have a product manager, a designer, a QA person. Now a single person could do all of that because they're handing that kind of work to agents now. So what happens is like we used to have these teams that you had front end, back end, PM. Now it's just all full stack engineers. And the full stack engineers are not even like coding, right? They're just like talking to agents the whole day. But they have a very good understanding of like the code base. And these teams are actually pretty small. Windsurf, I think, only has like maybe 5 or 6 people now. And like infra team has like a dozen. So basically like you have these teams that are very lean, but they do all the roles that a team typically would have. So it's a very like generalist team to do a very large function. And I think that's kind of the future. When we talk to other organizations, they're still a little confused what to do. And what they can see though is who is really good at using the AI and who's not. So there might be someone that's doing dozens of agents at once, and there might be someone that's like maybe going with Claude Code one-on-one. And then like you could look at token output, you can look at merge PRs, you can look at a lot of metrics. You can actually see there's people that are 10x more effective and people that are 1x effective. Actually, it's people less than 1x. Those people are in trouble, by the way, people that are less than 1x. So I think that's the future, is finding these 10x type of people. You either pair them up into lean teams, or you can organize them to all lead different functions or different products and try to accelerate the throughput of a feature request. And by the way, when you're spending tokens, you're really buying time, right? If you're doing things correctly, you're bringing your roadmap forward. And I think that's something from an ROI perspective that's very hard to grasp for CFOs right now, which is like, if I can give you your product roadmap in 12 months to 1 month, how much are you willing to pay for that? Are you willing to pay 12x or 100x even? And that's something they haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, actually, I'm the head of the AI Foundry at Gen Digital, and we just had an all-hands meeting this morning. I told my engineers the same thing, right? We are kind of organizing engineers in the way there's no more like a back end, a front end. It's all just one group in some ways, right? So I'm a big advocate towards that direction, but I still want to play devil's advocate here. In a way, you are saying that an engineer needs to have product sense, maybe being able to do design, right? Maybe able to, think strategically. I mean, that most people or many people are not going to be able to do that. Do you see that at Cognition, you are able to do that because of your engineers are special or do you see this is an industry trend? How do you think about it?
I mean, I think hiring will change to find people that are more like generalists that can do multiple things. I do think Cognition it's maybe like the people there are very smart. I'm usually the dumbest person in the room when I'm at Cognition. So a very high talent bar that can do multiple things is probably the future of the workforce. Specialized roles need to probably start having multiple kind of roles. Like you need to have multiple angles to your job, because if agents are taking care of everything and you only have a very narrow piece of work, that means you need to spread out.
You kind of worked in many different companies before Windsurf and Cognition, right? Just put yourself in those pictures. How do you see it? Like, do you see that people are going to gravitate towards that sort of model, or it's going to be tough towards that model? How do you think?
I think the transition will be tough. I mean, it will take multiple years for large enterprises to really grasp this point.
But you think that the destination will be the same?
I think the destination will be the same. It might take longer than we think. The way that people organize teams today just doesn't make sense with agents.
Again, let me push back a little bit. Yeah. I mean, product, for instance, right? Having a product sense, you need some DNA in it. Not everyone will graduate towards that kind of being able to do that. Design is another example, right? For me, like when I look at X versus Y, to me, it's all about the same. So how do you kind of get people to do all those things together? How?
I think it doesn't have to be full stack, right? So if you give an example of a good product manager or designer, probably they can start prototyping now. Probably they can use agents to do user research. They could probably go into the data to find metrics that they couldn't do without an engineer before. They could probably, like a product manager could have the agent create multiple mockups of designs based off of what's in your Figma database,
So
right?
do you still see that there will be product person, designer, engineers in the future AI native organization? Do you still see that clear titles?
That's a great question. There might be the titles are probably going to be similar, but the overlap is going to be greater too.
Okay. Let's actually use many customers you talk to, right? Cognition, to me, you're at the very, very forefront. It will take the rest of the world some years to catch up. But you talk to so many different customers, right? They are at different stages of the transformation. Can you share with us, like, what's your observation out there? Like, do you see people are already, very much leaning forward, doing it, or do you see that most of the world still live in the past? And then can you give us a rundown about what you observe?
It's across the spectrum. I mean, in Silicon Valley, people are very, very far ahead. People are adopting tools. There's a culture in Silicon Valley of having the engineers just choose the tools they want and then just go at it, which is really bad for Devin, by the way. Devin requires a lot of setting up security, like to get connected to your repos, to make changes to the repo. So it's actually, Silicon Valley is actually very bad for cloud agents in general. Anyway, so if you look across the world now, you look at the East Coast. East Coast is
so your sweet spot is people outside of Silicon Valley who do not want to do all sorts of things instead of that. Is that what you're?
I think I think Silicon Valley is typically probably 6 months to a year ahead. And then if you look at East Coast, it's like probably 6 months ahead of the global. Global is still like some people are writing code. Like we just deployed in the Middle East, and they were still writing code.
Okay.
But it's all over all over different types of industries and regions have different layers of maturity of the AI journey.
Yeah, I think it was before your time. The biggest, you said 2 years old, right? I think the biggest headline news about cognition, other than that drama thing, is probably Goldman Sachs adopting cognition as a software engineer, right? Virtual software engineer. That was one of the biggest news out there for a short while, at least, because every day there's a big news. But going back to my original question, so you are saying that a lot of companies outside of Silicon Valley, they have, relatively speaking, more tendency to adopt your things. But my question is a little bit different. I'm actually asking, do you see that organizations outside of Silicon Valley, they are kind of started running towards this AI native organization, or do you see that whenever you talk to customers, they still live in the pre-AI world? Like, what's your assessment?
So I would say startups are more AI native than anything else I've seen. For large organizations, I think it'll take between probably 2 years, 2 to 3 in Silicon Valley, probably 5 years outside of Silicon Valley. And that's because there's not a lot of turnover. The headcount's very similar. The amount of ambition, the amount of work that they're working on is probably similar. So it's hard to change that into an AI native organization outside of a very high tech forward company.
Okay, so Gen Digital is a tech company. So let's only use a tech company as a kind of a calibration sort of the thing here. In the tech world, what do you see? Like from startup to big company, what do you see their transformation stage?
Yeah. Okay. So there's actually two more categories here. One is if you are doing greenfield versus brownfield. So if you're a very old company, for example, like a regulated company or bank, there's a ton of tech debt. You have lots of code that's like on mainframe and COBOL. You have lots of projects to migrate. You even have code bases that are like monorepos that you need to make it into microservices so it's more agent ready, right? So these are kind of like brownfield stuff. And that is actually majority of the workloads that we see for those types of companies. For more tech companies, startups, that is more about accelerating roadmap. It's like getting the features out faster than they could before. So I break it down into those two categories. The latter category is actually harder to measure the ROI. So when we go to these banks and we can quantify how much money that we're saving because of like, hey, you had this mainframe, it was going to cost you $100 million to migrate. We did it for like $1 million, let's say. Great, that's a great ROI. But if I say like, oh, you built your mobile app 6 months faster, but you spent $6 million, what does that mean, right? So that is becoming the topic that's happening now. the ROI explanation.
Interesting. I never thought about it. You are saying that ROI is actually easier for you to articulate in a bank, like sort of the shops, because it's a project based. There is always a budget, and then now you are telling them instead of 100 million, it's a 50 million, whatever the amount that you charge or associated with it. But for the tech companies, you actually feel like it's harder to justify or no, to measure, right?
Yeah, and that there it comes down again more on personal preference if there's no ROI calculation there, right?
Because some of the value has to do with the speed or the number of features showing up in the product rather than costs.
Yeah, and this is where it's hard again for an enterprise first company to go through like a PLG motion, right? A PLG motion is like people are just grabbing like Claude Code, Cursor. They've seen this on the market. It's easy to install. But then again, they run like we talked about earlier. Like when you try to do these like large scale migrations or like have configurations you want to scale across the organization, that is another kind of like process rather than having everybody just install some dev tools.
Okay, so I was going to ask you a question about the token maxing, right? That's a phenomenon going on. Basically, some companies encouraging their employees to use as many tokens as possible. Whether that's a good thing or not, that's very contextual, right? But for CFOs out there across the board, everyone is having some concern, some worry, right? Hey, this thing I spent 1 million last year, but now it's going to be 5 million, 10 million this year. How do you think about it? Do you see that people should worry a lot, or your advice? Maybe you have a bias, but I still would love to hear your view that, hey, don't worry about it, right? The productivity you get is going to be 10x of that. So don't over-index on the cost of token. How do you think about this kind of things?
We worry about it tremendously. I mean, we want to roll out more tools for ROI management. Or visibility. We want to quantify the work we're doing with all these companies because otherwise we're going to get into these crazy negotiations on renewals. We might have churn. We might have very, very negative feedback if we're not able to prove the ROI of the tools. So I think that's maybe another gap with like PLG tools, which is like, oh, we're spending like $1 million, but I don't know what it got me, right? People still want engineers. I don't get it. There's some customers telling me that too. It's like they're spending as much money on their engineering team as tokens, but the output seems to be the same. So then it comes down to measuring the output and seeing if there's an ROI on the output. And people aren't doing that right now.
Okay. I think a lot of you answered me a lot of questions. I can go on. I would love to hear whether from the room or from online, there are any questions. In the meanwhile, I can always, continue to ask you a question. You competed with Cursor for a long time, right? Cursor, when the growth trajectory was amazing, but I wouldn't say stalled, but taping off, the previous growth trajectory, I would say have a lot to do with the cloud code, Anthropic. Do you see? I mean, Cursor is just one example, but there are a gazillion, right? At least dozens of the AI companies out there. What's the future of those AI companies in general? I'm pretty sure Cognition is in a good spot, but I'm talking about the group of the companies. Do you see that? Eventually Anthropic is going to take a vast majority of Anthropic, OpenAI going to take a vast majority of the shares anyways, or you feel like the battle is far from over?
It's a good question. There are situations where the models are doing things that other apps are doing now. So there's startups that are doing vibe coding, deploying it. There's companies doing slide generation. And you look at, and then Claude comes out with Claude Cowork, right? And then it like does all these things. And Codex is the desktop app now. It does a lot of things you can do locally too. And then you saw people doing OpenClaw and trying to come up with OpenClaw products and trying to sell that. And then all of a sudden, Claude releases Dispatch, and Codex has like an extension where you can like use your phone to talk to your computer. So I think that there is a danger of losing kind of your market share to these companies. Which is why, like, if you're a founder right now, you do need to focus on not just differentiation, but like, what are things that you can maintain? Like, if it is a customer relationship, and you're like, again, if you have deployed engineering, you're training them, they're like using you, they call you when they need something. That makes it a little bit harder for them to like move your contract away. And then if you're talking about like infra, for example, there's a lot of infra things that we're ahead of, but I think in 6 months they'll catch up. So what does that mean? That means we need to stay 6 months ahead. At a constant basis, right? And right now there's no moats. Whatever company's out there, it can easily be just eaten away by a competitor, right? And enterprises aren't feeling this yet. They feel it in the stock price, but they're not really seeing a competitor just step up out of nowhere and just eat their business completely. But they
Because
will.
no one is
Yeah.
going to swap out the Salesforce overnight. No one, right? You have to be insane to do that. But however, you may swap out cloud from cloud code to Cursor or vice versa overnight. That's still possible. Do you think there is that? Is that what you mean by no mode, or how do you?
So I think there's multiple angles on this too. So like for example, if you are plugging all your sensitive data into one control plane, that is harder to switch out because you don't want to plug that into multiple vendors
It's
too.
not easy, but I think it's doable.
It's
Right?
doable for sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
switching out the Salesforce Workday is impossible for practical purposes overnight. It's impossible.
Actually, let me tell you a few stories here. These agents are getting very, very good at migrations. We are seeing, for example, we have, I don't know if I can say the logo, but they had this Oracle to Postgres migration. They budgeted 1 year. They budgeted, I think it was like 3 million. They did it during the pilot, right? So it's like, if you do it during the pilot, you're like, wait, maybe migrating from Workday isn't that hard, right? So that is something that, again, enterprises do not see this, but this is happening behind the scenes. Like you can migrate off Workday in a day. If we really tried, we could create a playbook for you to do that probably, right? So this is like people are just not. This is maybe one insight maybe here that people should think about. If you're able to hand off end-to-end work to agents, especially migrations, it's very easy to verify the work is good. What does that look like in the future?
You already gave me two insights I didn't think about it. One is, measuring the ROI in those traditional companies is actually easier than measuring the ROI in the more like Silicon Valley tech companies when it comes to coding agent. The other thing is the migration is not as hard as one would have thought. That's what you're saying. I was just looking at a Workday stock price. But anyways, but kidding aside, I still wanted to ask, we talk about Cursor, right? What happened to Microsoft? Because, I thought 3 years ago that the entire game of AI coding was done because Microsoft owned what, 80, 90% of the market share. They just lost overnight. Like, what happened? And then do you think such a phenomenon will be replayed again, or its potential to be replayed again?
I mean, this is typical innovators' dilemma. Like they have VS Code, like they're not going to create another IDE, so they're limited to the confines of like what they can do. That's one aspect of it. The second is like all the best people probably went to good startups. They probably went to Anthropic and OpenAI and Cognition and other companies. And I think people maybe under-index on how good a really good talent is. Like if you have a really good team, they can do way more. Like I already talked about, you can already see 10x versus 1x types of people just using agents. But there's people that are so smart they can really change the entire trajectory of the company. Just one person, right? And if you have a whole team of those people or a whole company of those people, that does make a difference from a Microsoft versus a startup. I think that is maybe underappreciated in addition to the innovator's dilemma as well. And you look at, and this is maybe a good case study, which is Windsurf went to Google, right? The team. And Sergey, by the way, is like working very closely with that team. I don't know. I just don't hear about them as much. So even with all the advantages they have all the compute, they have like free access to models. They have.
That's
they have
my next
control.
question.
Yeah.
Google, apparently, they blew it up again, right? At least on the coding side. But of course, the rumor is Sergey has actually started off a new project doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe, and this is maybe like a discussion. It's like, is it like bureaucracy? Is it because I need layers of approval? Do I need to route decisions to the right people and that slows things down? Do I not like allocate compute because there's so many projects going around at Google, right? So I don't know the answer, to be honest. Like I do think it will be studied in the history books of how the Microsoft lost this like lead. But I think my perspective is like you just have a very talented, hungry, fast-moving team, and they're probably going to out-execute most
Do you
of
think
them.
it's too late to do another AI coding agent startup today?
There might be other angles that are not addressed, right? I mean, the problem is like the moment you address it, maybe Cognition just adds it to the feature set or Anthropic adds it to the feature set. I'll just give you an example, which is like there's a lot of code review startups that are popping up all over the place. There's a lot of like Excel extensions, like using these startups would modify your work on your finances, and then Anthropic just rolls out like Claude for Excel, right? So it might be very hard to start something without some very unique differentiator.
Since you mentioned the code review, I forgot to ask this question. So I'm assuming pretty much close to 100% of the code is written by AI at Cognition at this point. What about review? Like, what percentage of code is reviewed by human these days?
We still review the code. I would say we have a product called Dev and Review. It's roughly made us 3x faster at reviewing, but then that becomes a new bottleneck. And what I predict is going to happen is that the AI models will be better at review than humans with probably about 9 months. And then that is when you will really unlock this this trajectory of like execution, right? Because you could just literally just throw everything at agents and it's done. It is in production. So that part again is still next year. But until then, we still have our team.
What percentage is reviewed by human at Cognition today?
No, it should be 100%. It's still 100%.
Okay, 100% reviewed by humans.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. Anthropic, OpenAI of the world, they claim that a good chunk of their code is already reviewed by AI. They sort of classify the PRs at different level depending on the importance or the consequence of it, right?
Yeah, so we do the same thing. We flag specific like changes that make big impacts. We flag bugs. We flag the features. We actually organize the PRs in ways that when you're reviewing a feature, it's all stacked up. If you look at traditional GitHub reviews right now, it's like the file, right? You see a file, what are the changes? You see the next file, what are the changes? So we are really making sure that like if a human's reviewing it, it is like very fast still. It is not like the traditional sense of reviewing the code.
Okay, any questions from online or from the room? Okay, here's a question.
Hey, couple of questions. I mean, particularly on the brownfield and the greenfield side of things. It's good to hear you're able to get the 7x, improvement. We are on the brownfield side. A lot of the systems are pretty kind of, at least 10 plus years old. We are working on trying to figure out like how to get to that productivity gain. We are not there even to like 200% gain or anything of the sort. What is something you are seeing out there, like for brownfield customers? What are they doing to make it better? At least keep the goal right. I'll get to 7x sometime in the future. But what are the next steps you think you can do?
Yeah, one of the major insights we've learned in the last couple of months is event-driven agents. So event-driven agent is an agent that is set off without human intervention. And what are these types of use cases? So one of them is vulnerabilities. The moment they're spotted by like a sneak or a sonar cube, it just automatically fixes it for you. Or if you have a vulnerability backlog, it can just go and burn down and just start fixing all of those as well. Or a bug report is given in. Like who here wants to go and replicate the bug, right? Nobody wants to go, nobody raised their hand. So you have Devin launch the app, try to replicate the bug by clicking around, and then it finds the bug and it fixes it for you. So all these use cases are now completely handed off to agents. And that frees your team up to have the time to then parallelize other types of work as well. So I think event-driven is like one of the first steps. You plug in all the systems to automatically fix itself. And then you can work on the things that they don't have to drop their time to go do that. They could work on other stuff. And then organizing the projects, we like to say organize it by ROI. So like if you have a very expensive migration, try to figure out how to use agents to migrate it over or modernize it. And then our team would help you to do that. And then after that, your team should know how to use Devin to do other types of modernization as well.
The secret is FDR, right? FDE, forward deployed engineer is the secret.
Yeah.
Lynn, do we have any from online? No. Okay, I can go on a little bit more. We talk about transformation, we talk about technology. What about skill set for everyone to think about it? You already mentioned earlier, forward deployed engineering who's technical, but also can deal with clients, customers, but that's still just one dimension, right? Other dimension is not everyone is going to be FDE, right? So what other dimensions? What sort of field that people should get into? Because in this company we have, even in this room we have people doing marketing, sales, engineer, very wide spectrum of what we are doing. But what's your advice to such a wide spectrum of the different functions, people from those functions?
Yeah, Bill, think of this like machine learning. Like you have a reward function, and you're optimizing for that reward. So if it's If it's marketing, is it like number of eyeballs? So, is it a number of clicks? If it's sales, is it like number of responses, or like is it just pure revenue? So once you've figured out that reward function, then you need to have the curiosity, and you need to have this like drive to try out all these AI tools to see what you can do to get to that reward function. You have to think like an agent, to some extent, but you do have to be curious about trying as many other possible tools, or even using Devin for non-engineering tasks, which is what we do a lot for, and then just seeing if that accelerates you to those goals. And I think that is maybe the best thing you can do right now. And when you start measuring like throughput or output, I should say, of the team here, you will see a difference. Like if you're optimizing for reward function and it goes 10x, great. Like you've used the tools to get you there, right?
Okay, marketing, sales. What about HR? Do you think HR is being disrupted by AI? What do you see with your customers out there?
It's a good question. I mean, there's obviously HR migration, like the data migrations and stuff, but like in terms of actual functions, I mean, maybe they're using the AI to like get data is one aspect, but in terms of the actual HR team, probably I don't see that much actually getting disrupted so far, from my
So
perspective.
everyone should just apply a job at HR.
I,
Is
I,
Kara here?
I actually think a lot of the HR functions could be automated by AI, but it's like stuff they don't want to do, right? It's like, yeah, there's like dirty work obviously, and you'd rather have agents handle off a lot of the paperwork, for example. So you can still optimize the HR role. It's just not getting as disrupted.
Okay, I'm going to stretch a little bit. What about for kids still applying for college or still thinking about what I'm going to do in the future? What should they think about it?
Be an FTE, right? Outside of being an FTE, I think using AI to learn is like the best thing for humanity even right now. Like you can just pull up like ChatGPT, and if you want to learn anything, you could turn on voice mode and just talk to it and ask and learn more. If a research paper comes out, you can put that in Notebook LM and put it in a podcast format and listen to it, like have the research paper being described to you. There's even a mode where you can interrupt the host of the podcast to ask questions. They're like, "Whoa, Jeff here is asking me a question," and you're like, "Whoa, this is AI. This is crazy." But this is all for education. All the stuff I'm talking about did not exist a few years ago, and like everybody here can like learn everything there is to know about humanity, right? And I think again, if you have the curiosity, you have the drive, you can also optimize for that too. You can learn any topic and get really good at it, and your kids can do this too. Your kids ask questions all the time. If you have this system where they're able to learn from the AI. That'd be the ideal state. The bad state though is they rely on AI for the answer, right? So if I say like write this paper for me, okay, here's ChatGPT, write me the paper. That's the bad state. They're not using critical thinking. They're not actually learning anything. That part I would avoid. But the other stuff I would try to optimize for.
Interesting. My CEO actually joined our all hands meeting at Cloud Foundry. He basically said two things very similar to what you said: the critical thinking, and then also having a lot of curiosity to actually that's important. But I think you still dodged my question a little bit. I'm actually asking a tougher question. Do you think kids these days they should learn more like engineering, STEM kind of things, or more like liberal arts, or what do you see so that they have brighter future, whatever that means? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, given today's state, it is like learn how to be social, learn how to talk to people, learn the foundations. So even if it's physics and math and computer science, I think all these are very good ways to understand like large systems and how they work together. So I would still recommend studying those. I think like liberal arts, I'm not exactly sure what the job future is for that either. But if you want to, like, if you really want to be forward-looking, astronomy now, like space is becoming like a new frontier. Robotics is becoming a new frontier. So mechanical engineering and how to wire those together. And then even biosciences right now. So if you become a doctor that's also good at ML, and you could train data sets for companies that are doing AI for like health, right? These are all fields that are like very, very scarce to find people. So I would like try to, in today's state, that's what I would be learning right now.
Any last minute question from the audience here? Okay, please. You need to use the microphone, please.
Yeah, so
Is the microphone on?
Your microphone needs to be on. Can you close it? Getting a little bit closer.
No, I don't think it's on. Is it green? Is it green?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, just speak louder.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the few of the constraints that we see right now in using AI is about security in terms of like, can I have my AI agent have access to the production database? Can I have my AI really connect to those systems which are super critical? Like we had an incident where the database was wiped off in one of the incidents. So how do we get to that point, or maybe at your company? Do you have these AI agents really connect to the production systems, which are critical? And how do you manage the security aspect of it? We know that 99% of the time they're going to do fine. It's just that 1% that really gets us scared that we really don't want those incidents to happen. So how do we address those security aspects, and how do you do that at
by the way, this is a very common problem with like using Cloud Code and coming up with your environment, because it's your own credentials. You have access to the production database. When you set up a Devin, you are creating a user credentials that only has read access. So it does have access to production data, but it can't do anything else, which could be bad too, because you might need to create tables that work with the new features you're building. Then you have to do that outside of it, right? So you are creating this VM image that has the exact access you need to write code, create PRs, to read data that's critical, but not write to it, to use MCP servers that are also able to interact with other systems as well. Sometimes you do give it write access as well. And then you're able to take that image and then you clone it and everybody here has access to do it, right? So that's how you scale Devin across the organization. If you scale your own credentials with a system, it is risky, it is dangerous, which is why we have this setup, an isolated VM as well. So it can't like run, it could run the app, but it doesn't actually make changes or doesn't affect public internet, for example. So there's a lot of things you can do to make it secure.
Right, and even reads will have problems, right? Yeah, even with reads, I mean, you can always have a read query that can still bring down your application. And when you restrict access, let's say you're only providing read only, but then you're again getting that efficiency out of it. I mean, a lot of things that you could have done if you would have provided it a write access, we're just taking that capability out of that agent by not providing it the right access. So, I mean, the idea should be we should provide it the right access, but we should also trust it to do the right thing. Can we get to that point, and how can we get to that point, or have you already reached that point?
So I think what you're describing is like being an admin to a bunch of systems and making a lot of changes. I think that is a little bit different. Well, by the way, which is like an agent you can make too. But what we try to make it, the format we try to make is you're making code changes. Some human has to approve this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If you're reading a database, of course, like you don't want to have 10,000 agents bring down like the database because there's not enough bandwidth. So maybe you clone the database, maybe you have it read from a separate one, right? So the way you set it up again is you need to design it for scale. You have to assume whatever you're designing, you want the whole organization to work on, or you spin up clones of it in this VM setup where that it's running in an isolated environment that it doesn't affect anything. So these are all ways to do it. But if you're actually, again, making like destroying tables kind of queries, you probably don't want to do that with an agent. You probably want to like do it manually and verify before you run the command, right? That's how I'd describe it.
There is still job for a human to do, deleting the table.
Tables, yeah.
Yes. I think this is a pretty wonderful session. You mentioned that, a few things I took away, right? In 9 months, humans do not need to review code, and then we should get most of the things automated. The kernel performance sensitive application, you don't think we are quite there today? When do you think we are going to be there from AI coding agent? 2 years or maybe never? How do you think about it?
My guess is like NVIDIA comes out with like they have a new model called Nemotron, and I bet you they're like, oh, we should get this data into this model and make sure everybody's building on NVIDIA, right? So, and then by the way, NVIDIA does work with like these inference providers to optimize the kernel.
It's not just NVIDIA, it's actually, to your earlier point, it's also the data set, right? There's a limited data set to solve that problem.
Right, but it's in their best interest to make that easier to program too, right? It's in their best interest to optimize throughput for inference providers.
But the future for whether software engineers or for kids out there who are still looking for what to do in the future, what you're seeing is being technical and, being able to interact with people, that sort of the combination of the skill set is going to be more and more important.
And general, like having a wider array of specialization. I mean, it's the opposite. It's oxymoron. A wider array of specialization. But that is truly what I think is going to be very important. Finding talent that can cross domains is very, very useful. It's because it's rare, and it is very useful for building companies and scaling organizations, right?
And thank you very much for coming over here.
All right. Thank you for having me.